want to talk about the mysterious disappearance of John and Shelly Markley. I'm here with Rain. Have you ever heard about John's and Shelly's disappearance case?
I have never heard of them at all.
Right, so we have a picture of John and his wife Shelly. They have been missing since 1995, since December 15th, so kind of around that Christmas time. The day started off fairly unconventionally for the family. The family consisted of John Markley and Shelly Markley. Together they had 5 children: Ruthie, Stacy, Bonnie, Crystal, and Johnny. So it's a pretty big family, and they resided in a very rural city of Bristolville in Ohio. The day started off fairly regularly. The kids, who basically ranged from ages from 8 to 15, in the morning, they left for school. However, when they arrived back home that afternoon, they found that none of their parents were actually home.
Was this a normal occurrence?
No, this was not, because usually Shelly would be waiting for the children to come back home, but she was not there. So when the children started to investigate the house, they found some weird things. When they arrived back home, they found that the doors were unlocked, and their parents, alongside their family's 1990 Chevrolet pickup truck, were missing. This was unusual because Shelly would usually wait for the children to come back from school. She was not home that day. Also, usually if Shelly would not be home on such an occasion, she would leave a note for the children. However, this time, there was no note left at all. Another interesting detail was that the coffee pot was still turned on. John's watch had been left on a shelf above the stove, and on top of that, Shelly, who was a pack-a-day smoker, left her cigarettes and lighter behind, which is unusual.
It seems like they just left in a hurry, honestly. Whatever happened, it seemed like they just hopped in the car and just drove.
Well, the mystery deepens. When the children went upstairs to investigate, they found that the family's gun cabinet, which John would usually keep locked because, it's dangerous when you have a lot of kids in the house, it was unlocked. However, since the kids had no idea how many guns John owned, they could not verify if anything was actually taken from the gun cabinet.
I mean, if it wasn't locked, then I'm gonna assume that yes, something was taken.
But that would probably mean that something was also left behind. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Maybe just 1 or 2 guns. Maybe they just took one.
We have no idea at this point. Also, there was a small safe in the parents' bedroom, and that safe was also opened. It had some important documents that were laying across, scattered around the room, as if someone had been frantically searching for something. And we also do not know at this point if anything was taken from that safe. The only thing that was missing from the house, that was, I believe, confirmed by law enforcement to be missing, was the family's checkbook to write checks.
Do you think whatever made them disappear is somehow related to finance, debts?
Some of the clues might lead us to think that way. I want to also bring up an interesting detail in this story as well about John's twin sister. John's twin sister, Bonnie, was suffering from cancer for a few years, from what I understand. And she actually passed away very shortly before John and Shelly went missing. And her funeral was scheduled the following day after John and Shelly went missing. Now, when the children found the house basically abandoned, they couldn't find their parents, they went and they stayed at their aunt's house. Now, the following day, when the Shelly and John, when they didn't show up for Bonnie's funeral, and Bonnie and John were very close as twins, then the family raised an alarm because it was super out of character for the family to be missing like that. Law enforcement started investigating. First, they looked at the house. They found no signs of forced entry or any evidence of foul play in the Markley home. They initially considered that the most possible explanation for the disappearance of the couple would be that they had ran off due to overwhelming stress. They had things that happened in their life recently, devastating things, such as a couple years prior, their other house burned down. Exactly 1 year later after that, John's father had passed away. And a few months after that, their nephew committed suicide. So there was a lot of stress that the Markleys had been going through. However, none of the extended family members believed that John and Shelly voluntarily disappeared, because nobody believes that they would leave their 5 children like that, who they loved very much.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. Like, sure, a lot of bad things happen to the extended family and to the family in general, but there are kids, and weren't the kids their priority?
Exactly. And now let's move into the further investigation details in this story. So their truck, the 1990 family Chevrolet truck, was actually found. The truck was found shortly, within days of the couple's disappearance. It was found locked and abandoned in a hardware store parking lot on Elm Road, 10 miles away from their home in Bristolville. The truck was covered in mud. Another odd detail, this is due to how meticulously John kept the truck in pristine condition. So it indicates that the truck was potentially driven in some sort of more rural off-road areas where it would get muddy. On top of that, the family's cell phone was still inside of the vehicle. Now, this is 1995, so the cell phones may have been a little bit different. I was trying to figure out maybe there's a way for law enforcement to basically look at cell phone pings. And in 1995, I did research that it was actually possible, but the technology wasn't as advanced as it is right now. So I'm not really sure if they were able to get any information from those cell phone pings. And at this point, when law enforcement located the vehicle, then they started to believe that foul play is potentially involved in this case. And this is where the biggest lead in the Markley disappearance happened. Detectives soon learned that money had been taken out of the Markley's bank account on the day that they had vanished. A $1,000 check was signed by Shelly, and it has been cashed out at 10:36 a.m. at a Bank One in Bloomfield, Ohio, approximately 5 miles away from their home, on the same morning when the family, when the couple went missing. $1,000. This was interesting amount because in total in the bank account there was nearly $2,000. An additional $865 were left in the bank account. And now this is the strangest part. The teller, the bank teller who was servicing the couple, well, actually they were going to this bank drive-through, It's like a fast food chain, but
It was
like
a thing?
yeah, it's a thing in America. Yeah, I've never seen that one here.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, apparently they have those drive-thrus. But now the teller who was serving the people at the bank's drive-thru section, she reported seeing an unknown male in the truck with the two adults, with John and Shelly. Unfortunately, the teller could not remember anything about the appearance of this man, but this man is most certainly the person who holds all of the answers in the disappearance. All right, let's quickly sum up what we have here. We have John and Shelly Markley, the parents of 5 young children. They went missing in the morning on December 15th. It was kind of getting close to that Christmas time, so maybe there's a festive vibe already happening. On top of that, seems like the family, or like the 2 missing adults, they must have left in a rush, because there was a lot of strange details left in the house. We have the coffee pot still on. We have cigarettes left behind, which Shelly would probably take with her. We have potentially ransacked gun cabinet and a potentially ransacked safe in their bedroom. The only thing that was missing was a checkbook, which I presume was later used at that Bank One in Bloomfield to cash out $1,000. It's strange because there was more money left in the bank account. Why do you think I'm assuming at this point, the family is being held at potentially gunpoint by an individual who ordered them to drive to the Bank One to cash out some money. But why would the person cash out $1,000 instead of cashing out the full thing? Because it was almost $2,000 in the bank account.
I honestly had this picture in my head wherein mom and dad, when the kids were out for school, they were a threat probably came. Like the guy probably came. I don't know, like some threat. They probably must have learned of some threat, and that's why the gun storage has been ransacked. Maybe the dad brought some guns, maybe from some shady person, and they drove and meet whoever this person is. And potentially this couple owned that sketchy person some money, but maybe a lot of money. Who knows? They went to the bank together with that sketchy person, but Shelly doesn't really want to pay him everything they have because they have 5 kids and it's nearly Christmas time. So they paid him maybe just like half of it or maybe a little bit of it, and that person didn't like that, and that's it for them.
You think that was the case? I kind of assumed that, well, okay, how about I progress the story a little bit?
Oh, yes,
because we
please.
have some more information. I like the way you're thinking here, but I think you might change your, or actually maybe you won't change your thoughts about certain details. So now let's bring in a person named Stephen Durst. So Stephen Durst was a man who was a former employee of John's. So John was reported online that he was an independent truck driver. So I think he may have ran some sort of a truck driving business, while Shelly was a stay-at-home mom. Now, John had employed a man named Stephen Durst at one point. Now, this man was apparently held some sort of a grudge against the Markleys, and he even privately claimed at one point that the Markleys owed him $1,000. Very convenient amount, right?
Very.
So this is not where the story ends. This man actually at one point called the extended family members, and he claimed to be holding John and Shelly captive, like called them and said that I have kidnapped John and Shelly, and he then demanded a $10,000 ransom.
I mean, I don't understand why he would do that, but I think we have the culprit right here.
The number one suspect, right? Mm-hmm. So they reported Durst to police. And Durst then was stalked by law enforcement. I think the family kind of cut a deal with this man, Stephen Durst, so that he would go to a particular gas station where he would be left a bag filled with money. So the bag was actually filled with rags, and subsequently Stephen Durst was arrested. When he was investigated, law enforcement actually submitted him for a couple of polygraph tests, which apparently he had failed a few of them, or he showed signs of, I guess, deceiving nature in his answers, something like that. But law enforcement overall believe that he was just an opportunist who was trying to basically cash in on the disappearance of the two people, and they did not really believe that he was actually responsible. They think that he just heard about the situation and he just cashed out. But the fact that he was already claiming to others prior to the family's disappearance that the family owed him $1,000, which is a very convenient amount, because let's remember the same amount was cashed out at Bank One on the same day that the family went missing. That's kind of bizarre, in my opinion. And I do think that at this point, this guy is our number one suspect in the disappearance. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, I'm really just curious about the investigation. Did the police just completely relied on the polygraph test, or did they do like further investigations in this guy's property, with this guy's truck or car, whatever?
Exactly. By the first anniversary of the Markley's disappearance, investigators actually had a different opinion 1 year after. So one of the investigators, I did not know who exactly this was, but I have his quote. This person stated, "I truly believe that Stephen Durst knows what happened to them, and he just won't say." Oh, this was Chief Investigator Janae Timko. She also added that Durst was out of work when the Markleys disappeared, and he had told a lot of people that Markleys owed him $1,000. And I would assume that this person, Janae Timko, she probably has a lot more information about the case. So if she believes that Stephen Durst knows something, she said, "I truly believe that Stephen Durst knows something." So I think there's a high chance that Stephen Durst actually knows something.
Yeah, I mean, we're just relying on public information, and it's so obvious that the Steven guy is the culprit. Like, let alone having so much information that actually leads to him.
Exactly. On top of that, I tried to find out more about this guy, Stephen Durst, online. I couldn't find him. I couldn't find any information about a man named Stephen Durst. I do think that he has been charged. He was arrested and he was convicted of a felony charge of extortion for his ransom scheme. And he was sentenced 4 to 10 years in prison. He has consistently denied any involvement in John's and Shelly's disappearance and has never been charged in direct connection to the crime. But he was sentenced for the scheme, as he was trying to kind of make some money off of
Yeah,
it.
it's just pretty sad how we never actually figured out what happened to the couple.
Yeah, this is very sad because you have 5 children who have lost their parents, who have lost their aunt, who have lost one of their grandparents, and their former home was burnt out just years prior. It's a terrible situation for the children.
Yeah, and for the perspective of the parents, I don't think anyone would just intentionally abandon the children, wait for them to go to school, and then just ditch them.
Exactly. No, it's a strange kind of development now.
Yeah, like sorry.
Of course,
whatever
no.
happened,
Yeah.
it's not their intention to leave, to ditch the kids.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. But everything kind of, to me, so far seems, in this case, seems like the family, someone entered the home, potentially at gunpoint, ordered them to kind of ransack the safes, maybe asked how much money they have in the house, and Shelly said, "Well, we have some money in the bank account." That's when they grabbed the checkbook and they drove to Bank One. And for some reason, I think that the family was later moved to somewhere in a more rural area where their truck would get muddied and the truck was left behind. But I do think that there would be so much DNA evidence on that truck. Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah, definitely. That's why I'm asking if like the police investigated further or they just completely relied on the polygraph test.
At first, they said that law enforcement believed it was a case of a runaway. So I do hope, not a runaway, but that they had abandoned the family. But I hope that's not what they leaned on.
It doesn't seem to be the case.
No, post factum, of course, we know that it's definitely not the case. But in the moment, I hope they kind of took like the precautions to investigate.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And I hope they tried to check if Stephen Durst's DNA can be found on the truck. Because that's probably the most obvious thing you would probably do. You'd want to see if Stephen Durst's DNA is somehow on the truck. Right?
Yeah, but then again, this is an old case, so probably the technology and the way they investigate is not that efficient.
On top of that, it's a small town in Ohio.
There we go.
Where
Yeah.
law enforcement doesn't deal with these types of cases, I would presume, on a regular basis. Now, there was another interesting development that came about in 2015. So, actually, sorry, in 2020, there was a development. And some people suspect that a man named Milton Kurtzman, who was 71 in 2020, may have been somehow connected to the Markley's case. It's a bit muddy, this whole story with Milton Kurtzman. So this person, Milton Kurtzman, 71, in 2020, he was arrested and charged with felonious assault for shooting his roommate.
71-year-old?
Yeah, he shot his roommate, who was, I believe, a 64-year-old man. I was able to find one news article about this man, Milton Kurtzman. The bizarre thing, there are a few bizarre things that are happening here. So the first bizarre story, how Milton Kurtzman kind of comes into the picture here. Well, the first thing that I would like to mention here is that after he was arrested for shooting another man, I believe there was some sort of altercation between the roommates, and this is all happening in close proximity to the family home of the Markleys in kind of that rural Ohio location. So Milton Kurtzman shoots his, I believe, 64-year-old roommate, who manages to kind of stumble upon to the neighbors and asks for help, and he managed to somehow survive that attack. He was shot 3 times in the abdomen. Milton Kurtzman is arrested and subsequently dies less than 24 hours later of natural causes in prison, which is kind of weird.
Well, that's a massive coincidence.
Yeah, that's a coincidence. And, law enforcement says...
Very convenient for him.
Law enforcement told the media that Milton Kurtzman died of natural causes shortly after being arrested. And then, right after he passed away in prison, authorities began an extensive search of his property, refusing to reveal the purpose of this investigative turn. I guess it makes sense to search a violent man's property who is willing to commit homicide, right? But this is where the thing kind of took an interesting turn. Another officer from Trumbull County, so Trumbull County Sheriff Paul Monroe said something very interesting back in 2020. He specified that when they were searching Milton's, property, they were hoping to find something that would crack a particular cold case. And he said that this is something that dates back historically 20 years that we're looking at. And I don't think there's anything else that would date back 20 years in that very rural area of Ohio. So a lot of people are assuming that what Paul Monroe, the sheriff of Trumbull County, is trying to tell the media is that they're maybe suspecting that this Milton Kurtzman individual who was shooting his neighbor back in 2020, at 71, maybe 25 years prior in 1995, he could have been responsible for the disappearance of John and Shelly Markley. And I mean, he already showed tendencies of being a very violent individual
3 times. Shot 3 times.
in the abdomen, clearly intending to kill the man, I believe. So I think Milton Kruzman, another person of interest in this case, and I don't think they were ever able to find anything.
The connection?
Yeah, or at least they didn't really, publicly announce anything, but another strange character in that Ohio region could be somehow connected. What do you think? Do you think there's a chance?
Of course, there's a chance. He already showed violence, but at the same time, I'm just curious. Could there be a connection between the couple, this guy and Steven?
Oh, that's a good question, but I've never read about any such connection.
Right. It's probably not going to be a public information, but I'm just curious,
Yeah.
Because there could be a connection between all 4 of them.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say we're gonna keep our eyes open,
Of course, and we're going to keep you guys posted.
just in case something new comes up.
Of course.